Echoes of the Reptilian Mind. A Journey of Healing, Awakening, and Light. Chapter 1. The Arrival. Brad Carter didn't believe in angels, aliens, or anything that couldn't be explained with skin, blood, and the occasional bottle of whiskey. So when the first light broke through the clouds over Atlanta, shimmering like fractured diamond and humming in chords his body could feel but not hear, his first reaction was simple. He closed the blinds. Another drone show, he muttered, though deep down he knew it wasn't. This wasn't Vegas. And the air, it had changed. Thicker, charged. It wasn't until the power went out, citywide, that he got up from the couch. Outside, people were already flooding into the street. Phones dead. Cars stalled. The light in the sky had shifted. Now it hung like a colossal crystal suspended in the atmosphere, faceted and slowly rotating, catching sunlight and bending it into rainbow rings that stretched for miles. Brad stepped onto the sidewalk, barefoot. Everything was silent. No engines, no dogs, no birds. Just the soft pulse of something watching. A woman clutched her child. An old man fell to his knees. A man in a business suit began to cry. Then the sky spoke. "We come not to rule. We come to reveal." The voice was genderless, layered like wind through stained glass, yet somehow clearer than any voice he'd ever heard. It was not loud. It resonated, bypassing the ears and landing somewhere deeper, behind the ribcage, near the memory of his childhood bedroom and the nights he hid under blankets, pretending not to hear the yelling. "Your world suffers not from violence, but from memory. You live beneath masks you did not make. We come to dissolve the chain of suffering." All across the world, through cloud, sky, sea, the crystalline ships descended. No engines, no doors. They didn't burn or blast. They just were, like they had always been there. Brad felt it before it happened. A sudden pull, not physical, not emotional. Like his thoughts had been tuned to, not spied on. More like answered. "Brad Carter," the voice whispered, inside him this time. He stumbled back, heart racing. No one else reacted. "You have carried wounds not of your making. You have hidden them beneath silence. You are ready." He looked around. No one was speaking. People were frozen, some weeping, some kneeling, some standing still like statues beneath the prism sky. "With this new era," the sky voice resumed, echoing across rooftops and trees, "your world will see the end of endless war. Not by force nor submission, but by the unmasking of what was always hidden. When the false is revealed, only truth remains, and truth cannot harm you." Brad felt his knees go weak. Memories surged. His father's eyes when he said, "Don't make me the bad guy, Brad." The quiet dinners with his sister Maya, where no one spoke of the screaming that had just happened. The years of overworking, overthinking, overdrinking, trying to be invisible but still loved. He thought he'd buried all that. But now it was rising. "You are not broken," the voice whispered privately again. "You were wounded. The wound can be closed." His breath caught. A sound rose in the air, like a choir made of light. No words, just feeling. Peaceful, grieving, holy. He looked to the sky, where the crystal ship hovered over the skyline like a stillborn star. Across the surface, glowing patterns flowed like circuitry made of rivers, Glyphs forming, shifting, fading. He didn't know how, but he understood them. The mask will fall. The parasite will starve. Every lie will become visible. And every wound will have its chance to heal. Brad turned toward the nearest building, a hospital. People were standing outside, some on their phones trying to restart them, some simply staring at the ship with slack jaws. Then, one by one, people began hearing private messages, just like he had. Some collapsed, overcome. Others broke into sobs. A few ran, as if afraid to be seen. He felt it then. The separation beginning. Not physical, not yet, but something vibrational. A split in perception. Some people looked up and saw hope. Others saw invasion. And deep in his gut, Brad knew. This wasn't a war of weapons. It was a war of truth. He walked slowly down the street, barefoot on hot concrete toward the light. He didn't know why. He just knew. He was ready to stop hiding. Chapter 2. The Infection. The sky didn't change after the first transmission, but people did. In the hours that followed, the news networks scrambled to make sense of it all. With the power grid partially restored, broadcasts resumed in jittery fragments, some live, some pre-recorded emergency loops. But nothing could explain the crystal ships. They didn't move, didn't fire, didn't speak again. Not aloud. But people were hearing them. Not everyone, but enough. Brad Carter sat in the back booth of a diner that hadn't served food since yesterday. The waitress, a thin woman in her 50s, poured him a cup of lukewarm coffee with trembling hands. She didn't speak, just kept glancing at the sky through the window. A young couple at the counter whispered about frequency attacks and alien psyops. One of them wore mirrored sunglasses indoors. Brad wasn't listening. He was feeling. The infection is not of the body, the voice had said to him again earlier that morning. It is of the field. He hadn't told anyone. How could he? You say you hear alien crystal beings talking inside your skull, and the next thing you know, you're locked up or labeled. Still, something in him trusted it. Not blindly, not naively, but deeply. Like remembering a song you'd loved before you were born. Across town, Dr. Alethea Rain was speaking at an emergency summit live-streamed from a university's basement auditorium. A trauma psychologist with a sharp jawline and steel in her tone, she had become a reluctant voice of reason since the phenomenon began. No, I don't believe they're hostile, she said, facing the camera. But I also don't believe they're gods. She clicked a slide on her outdated PowerPoint, a diagram of the human brain. What we're seeing may be a neurological activation, possibly electromagnetic, possibly harmonic. But the result is clear. People are reporting vivid memories, traumatic flashbacks, intense emotional catharsis, without any substance, hypnosis, or known technology. She paused. This mimics what we see in PTSD treatment, but it's faster, cleaner, and it's targeting one group of people in particular, those with unresolved trauma. Back at the diner, Brad watched the flickering feed on a mounted TV. He felt like she was speaking directly to him. We've spent decades studying narcissistic abuse, she continued. What we call cluster B patterns, narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, they all share one thing in common: a disconnect from authentic emotion. Many of them suffered early trauma, but unlike most, they adapted not by healing, but by masking. And that mask requires victims to survive. She changed the slide. This time, it was a scan of a brain lit up in the amygdala, the reptilian center. I believe these beings, if they are beings, are showing us something we've refused to see. That our culture is infected with a frequency, a survival-based, fear-driven pattern that passes through trauma, from generation to generation. Like a virus that can't be seen, only felt. She leaned closer to the mic. The parasite isn't in your blood, it's in your childhood. And it wears the face of someone you once trusted. Brad's hand trembled. The coffee went cold. His father's face, so calm in public, so cold in private. His sister Maya, who had learned to smile like him. The way Brad himself had shut down for years, unable to feel anything except guilt and obligation. It was like a network of invisible strings was being cut one by one, and with every string, a memory returned. He hadn't known it was missing. Brad, the voice came again, soft now, gentle. You are not infected, but you were wounded by one who was. His jaw clenched, his chest tightened, but the voice didn't press. You do not need to forgive. You only need to see. What is seen can be released. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the air changed. He saw himself at age 10, standing in the hallway outside his bedroom door, listening to his father laugh with someone on the phone. 2 minutes after slapping Brad across the face and calling him weak. He had convinced himself it wasn't that bad. But now, he saw the lie. The mask. The infection was real, not literal, not demonic, but energetic. A kind of emotional possession, passed like a virus, carried in unsaid words and subtle looks. A frequency that fed on fear, attention, and emotional compliance. And when Brad had stopped feeding it, it had turned cold. Back on the TV, Dr. Rain continued. If these beings can show us how to remove this pattern, not with chemicals or war, but through resonance and healing, then we may be standing on the edge of psychological evolution. She paused, then added one final line. Or we're witnessing the collapse of a system built on lies. Brad rose slowly from the booth. He felt different. Not better. Not healed. But awake. The parasite had a pattern. A mask. A weakness. It hated being seen. And the Luxari? They were here to make sure nothing could hide anymore. Chapter 3. The exposure. The masks didn't fall all at once. They cracked, subtle at first, like fine spiderweb fractures in a pane of glass, barely visible, but spreading. Brad noticed it first in people's eyes. The delivery driver who always smiled too wide. The landlord who spoke in kindness, but whose words always carried a threat. The co-worker who apologized with no weight behind it. Suddenly they all looked wrong. It wasn't their faces. It was their energy. Something about the frequency. Their masks no longer held. It started with one man on the street corner. He was yelling about the lizard people, as many had done before. Conspiracy stuff, normally ignored. But this time people stopped and stared, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. His face was stuck in a loop, smiling, scowling, blinking rapidly. A feedback glitch, like a hologram breaking. Then came the sound. A high-pitched whine, barely audible, but it made Brad's spine ache. And then the man dropped. Not dead, not unconscious, just empty. His eyes rolled back. His voice turned to a flat whisper, repeating, "Don't look at me. Don't look at me." Brad wasn't the only one who saw it. Others were beginning to react to the frequency shift. Some grew lighter, like they were walking more freely, seeing more clearly. But some, especially those who relied on manipulation, control, or image, began to unravel. A Luxari message hummed through his chest hours later. The parasite cannot survive when seen. It is not your enemy. It is your echo. The final echo of pain passed through bloodlines. Meanwhile, on the academic front, Dr. Rain's inbox exploded. She'd gone viral, not through polished news, but through 1,000 shaky live streams of people sensing energy, witnessing loved ones glitch, feeling past traumas rise like old ghosts returning for judgment. She posted a new update from her apartment. "We are seeing what psychologists have long theorized, but at a planetary scale. Masked personalities, narcissists, covert manipulators, and trauma-bonded partners are visibly deteriorating in public. But this isn't divine punishment. This is a shift in emotional transparency. Something in the Luxari's presence is unraveling our ability to lie with our bodies." She leaned into the camera, tired eyes burning with conviction. "If you feel like you're waking up, like you're finally seeing people for who they are, it's not a delusion. It's clarity. It's empathy regaining its sight." Brad scrolled through comments under the video. Survivors flooded in from all over the world. "My ex just collapsed mid-sentence. I used to be scared of him. Now he just looks hollow. My boss called a meeting and started crying. Said he didn't know why no one was listening to him anymore. My mom can't stop pacing. She keeps asking why I'm looking at her like that." Later that night, Brad stepped outside. The sky was filled with stars and one unmoving ship, glowing faintly like a lighthouse made of diamond breath. He felt them before he heard them. "It has begun," the Luxari said softly inside him. "The first veil has fallen. The false self cannot survive in a world of rising light." "But what happens to them?" Brad asked silently. "Some will return to themselves. Some will resist. Some will collapse. And some will hide." "What about the ones who hurt people?" "They will be seen." Brad thought of Maya, his sister, the only other person who knew what it was like in that house growing up. But she hadn't broken like him. She'd thrived. Got a high-powered job, wore clean clothes, smiled clean smiles. But her words had always felt cold. He remembered the time he tried to open up to her years ago. She'd tilted her head, patted his hand, and said, "We all have pain, Brad. You just need to get over it." He hadn't spoken to her since. The next day, Brad walked into a local grocery store for the first time since the arrival. Everything felt louder now. More raw. A man by the register was yelling at a clerk. Tense, controlling, demanding respect. And then, it happened again. A shimmer. The man's voice cracked. His body hunched. His hands began twitching like they didn't know how to gesture anymore. People turned and stared. Brad watched as a woman stepped forward. Calm. Gentle. "Please," she said. "Stop pretending. It's okay. We see you." The man let out a rasping breath. His knees hit the floor. Then he whispered something, over and over. "Don't leave me. Don't leave me. Don't leave me." The Luxari spoke again, this time not just to Brad, but to everyone tuned into the frequency. The mask is the wound's shield, but it also becomes its prison. Now the shield dissolves, and the pain must be faced, or passed on no more. At the end of the aisle, a mother clutched her daughter. They were crying together, but not in pain, in something else. Release. Brad walked past them. No words, just a silent understanding. This wasn't about judgment. It was about revealing. And revelation was beginning to sweep the earth. Chapter 4. The Offer. The ships opened the day after the first collapse. No explosion, no lights, no sound, just a ripple. Across every continent, at the base of each hovering Luxari vessel, a single petal of crystal folded outward like the opening of an alien flower. From within emerged a glow, not harsh, but soft, like morning sun diffused through fog, and floating in that glow were the pods. Brad Carter saw the first one in the city park. It hovered a few inches off the ground, spinning slowly. No control panel, no stairs. Just a translucent capsule shaped like a teardrop, glowing from within, pulsing with a beat that didn't match any heartbeat, but still felt like life. People gathered around it in silence. Some took photos. Some fell to their knees. Others stood frozen, as if waiting for permission to breathe. A Luxari frequency vibrated through the space around them, inaudible but unmistakable. "We offer relief, not salvation. You will not be fixed. You will be remembered. Your body remembers what love felt like before the wound." Brad felt the tug again. Not external, not even mental. It was deeper than instinct. A sensation in his nervous system, like the very cells of his body had turned toward the pod and whispered, "Please." But he didn't move. He wasn't sure if it was fear or guilt. News spread fast, even with half the world offline. People called them salvation coffins, frequency chambers, alien confessionals. Most just called them pods. Some who entered emerged within minutes, glowing, radiant, laughing through tears. Others stayed longer. A few came out trembling, quiet, walking as if gravity had changed. And some didn't come out at all. Not because they were harmed, but because they had chosen to remain. They were sleeping, resting, rebuilding. Brad watched a live stream on a stranger's phone. A man sat in a healing pod, surrounded by crystal light. The outer shell closed gently, and the interior turned transparent like ice. No wires, no restraints. Then came the projection. Scenes from his childhood. Fights, isolation. His own face at age 7, clutching a stuffed bear in a dark stairwell. And then a second image appeared. The adult version of him, stepping into the memory, kneeling beside the child, holding him. The voice of the Luxari echoed from the pod. "This is reparenting. This is frequency correction. You do not rewrite the past. You give it a new witness." Brad felt his throat tighten. He stood in front of a pod for nearly 10 minutes. People came and went around him. Some terrified, others ecstatic. The pulse of the pod was slow and deep, like it was breathing. He reached out. Before his fingers touched the surface, he heard her voice behind him. "You're actually thinking about going in there." He froze. Maya. She stood with perfect posture, sunglasses on, suit sharp. Same voice, same look. But the energy, it was like she'd been frozen in amber while the rest of the world turned to wind. "Why are you here?" Brad asked, not turning around. "I work with the Regional Health Authority. I'm observing, that's all." "You don't feel it?" "Feel what?" He finally faced her. The truth. She smiled, cold and brittle. "I think you finally lost it." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then she stepped closer, voice lower. "You really think those things are here to help us? They're offering therapy pods to billions of traumatized people with no oversight, no process, no accountability. That's not healing, Brad. That's control." He stared into her eyes and saw it. The mask. Glitching. Subtle. But there. He could feel her words like static, empty, rehearsed. Her voice was too smooth, too well-paced. Her body posture wasn't natural. It was calculated. She wasn't talking. She was performing. And for the first time in his life, he didn't fall for it. "I think you're afraid," he said quietly. She tilted her head. "And I think you're projecting." But he could see it now. The reptilian frequency. Not in her body. Not like a possession in a horror movie. But in her energy. The way she relied on power over softness, strategy over vulnerability. The parasite protects the host by making them feel superior. It cannot survive humility. Luxari transmission, 14:02 UTC. That night, Brad stood alone by the pod again. The park was mostly empty. He placed his hand on the surface. Warm. Alive. "You may enter," came the message. Not out loud, but inside him. "Will it hurt?" he asked. "Only the parts of you that were never truly you." He stepped forward, and the pod opened. Chapter 5. The Inner Child. The pod closed without a sound. Brad stood inside, surrounded by soft blue light that seemed to breathe. The walls were translucent, crystalline, but somehow alive, like frozen water that remembered being ocean. His breath slowed. There were no buttons, no screen, no instructions. But the pod knew. "You are safe now." The message wasn't a voice. It was a feeling. A gentle hum of warmth that vibrated in his spine and behind his heart. The places that had always tightened first when things went wrong. We do not erase, we reveal. Memory is not the enemy. It is the doorway. The light deepened, shifting into soft violet. Then, without warning, the pod filled with soundless images, ripples of memory that surrounded him in full presence, as if time itself had been pressed into the crystal. He was back in his childhood home. The hallway, the stairs, the door cracked open, and inside, a boy. No more than 7, kneeling beside a broken toy, breathing too fast. Brad's heart clenched. He had forgotten this day. But now, it unfolded in painful clarity. His father's voice boomed from another room. "What the hell is wrong with you, Brad? Why can't you just do one thing right?" The boy flinched. So did the man. "You do not relive the pain," the Luxari presence whispered. "You witness it with new light." The adult Brad stepped closer to his younger self. He saw the tension in the boy's shoulders, the shame in his downcast eyes, the way he clutched the toy. Not because he wanted to fix it, but because it was the only thing in the room not yelling at him. I was so small. You still are, and always will be. That part is yours to keep. He knelt beside the boy, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel pathetic doing it. He reached out, touched the boy's shoulder. The child didn't flinch. He leaned into him and cried. The pod shifted around them, illuminating every tear not shed, every scream swallowed. But it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like clearing smoke from a long burning fire. Scenes emerged around them, like floating shards of forgotten dreams. His mother, silent, pretending not to hear. Maya, watching from the stairs, unmoved. Brad, age 10, cleaning up glass so no one would get in trouble. Each memory held pain. But now he didn't have to survive them. He only had to see them. You were never weak, the Luxari told him. You were strong enough to feel, and smart enough to hide it. Then came the deepest cut. A scene he had buried beneath everything else. Age 16. He stood in the kitchen, bruised, not from fists, but from words. His father smiled across the table, hands clean, voice warm. You need to toughen up, son. No woman wants a man who sulks. And Maya had nodded. He's right. You're too sensitive. Inside the pod, Brad didn't rage. He didn't collapse. He just whispered, "That's the moment I left myself." The light shifted to gold. The child version of him reached out. Brad took his hand. They stepped forward together, and the kitchen dissolved. The pod dimmed. The images faded. And now Brad stood alone, but full of himself in the truest sense. The parts he had exiled, numbed, abandoned, they were all back. Not perfect, not polished, but real. He took a breath and realized he hadn't been breathing properly in years. The pod spoke one last time. The parasite cannot attach to the integrated self. Where there is no fracture, there is no entry. You are whole now. You may go. The pod opened. The sunlight felt different, softer, brighter. Or maybe he was. A small crowd stood nearby, people waiting, watching. One woman touched her chest and began to cry when she saw him. Do you feel it? She asked. He didn't have to answer. She already knew. Dr. Alethea Rain approached from the edge of the gathering. Her clipboard hung forgotten at her side. I've been watching these sessions, she said. I've seen people change before, but not like this. Brad smiled, not out of pride, but recognition. You've seen it too, haven't you? She nodded, then looked toward the next pod, slowly opening for the next person. A man in military uniform stepped forward. I think the war inside us, she said softly, might finally be ending. Brad turned toward the sky, where the ship still hovered, silent, brilliant. I think it already has. Chapter 6. The Panic. It began with silence. Not peace. An eerie, hollow silence where something familiar was missing. Brad noticed it on his third day after the pod. There was no shouting from apartment balconies, no angry horns at intersections. The talk show hosts, those loud, smug voices always selling rage, had gone off air. Some had canceled mid-broadcast, visibly trembling, unable to keep up the performance. The old frequency was dying, and the ones who lived by it were beginning to unravel. In office towers and government buildings, confusion set in. Leaders who once commanded attention with false charm or weaponized empathy now found their words falling flat. Assistants didn't nod with the same obedience. Staff began hesitating, questioning, walking away. The spell had broken. It wasn't mutiny. It was clarity. Across the country, viral videos captured what news outlets refused to cover. A celebrity accused of grooming collapsed during a live podcast, whispering, "Why are you looking at me like that?" A high-ranking politician began stuttering mid-speech, face twitching, then ran off stage sobbing. A megachurch pastor screamed at a silent congregation, "Don't you dare look at me like that." Each time, it was the same look in their eyes. Panic, not fear of punishment, but fear of being seen. Brad sat in a community hall with others who had gone through the pods. They called themselves the Clear, not as a cult name, but as a reflection of what they'd lost. The fog. They talked in low voices about their families, their partners, their jobs. "I looked at my boss today," said one woman, "and I could feel that everything he said was borrowed. There was no one home behind it." Another man shared, "My mother called me for the first time in years, said she was scared. She said she can't hold the mask anymore." Then she hung up. Dr. Rain stood beside them, notebook forgotten, listening more than leading. That evening, the Luxari sent out another frequency wave, this one clearer, more direct. The parasite does not die easily. It will retreat, regroup, and mimic light. Some will fake awakening to preserve control, but the resonance cannot be imitated. The light will always expose what does not belong. And still, some resisted. Underground forums lit up with conspiracy groups claiming the pods were mind control chambers. Videos emerged of self-proclaimed resistors hiding in basements, chanting affirmations to block alien invasion tech. Others became violent. A man in Florida attacked a healing pod with a sledgehammer. The crystal didn't crack. It simply absorbed the impact, pulsing a soft blue light in response. The man dropped the hammer moments later, collapsed, and wept like a child. Maya Carter sat in a closed-door meeting with political leaders, CEOs, and media heads. The room was tense, air thick with desperation. "We're losing grip," said one man, red-faced and sweating. "The stock market's in free fall because people stopped caring about money. They're hugging in the streets instead of working." A woman in pearls snapped, "My husband hasn't spoken in 2 days. He just stares at me like I'm a stranger." Maya stood. Her hands didn't tremble, but inside, something had cracked. "They're not looking at us like strangers," she said. "They're just seeing who we've always been." The room went still. She didn't wait for permission. She left. Brad saw her later across the street. She was standing alone, dressed impeccably, sunglasses off for once. Their eyes met. She looked human for the first time in years. Tired, exposed, small. But she didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just turned and walked away. The Luxari frequency surged again that night, this time across the entire planet. It didn't speak in words, it sang. A deep harmonic tone rang through the atmosphere, resonating in water, in plants, in the bones of every person alive. For those who had entered the pods, or released their defenses, it felt like coming home. For those still clinging to power, image, or control. It felt like an earthquake in the soul. Across the globe, the bifurcation began. Not in geography, in feeling. Some people laughed without reason, cried without fear, and hugged without barriers. Others isolated, screamed, blamed, accused. And a small fraction became eerily still, not enlightened, empty. The Luxari had warned of them. Some will refuse to heal even when the mask falls. When their power is gone and their image fails, they will drift into silence, unable to lie, but unwilling to be real. Brad sat on a rooftop, watching the ship above hum with radiant light. His phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Rain. Subject: cluster collapse. Body: the first psychiatric ward has cleared completely. Patients healed. Staff resigned. The resistance cells are forming now. They're calling it the panic. This is it. Be ready. A. Brad looked at the stars, then closed his eyes. The war wasn't with weapons. It was with truth. And truth had just become louder than the lie. Chapter 7. The divide begins. They called it the quiet divide. Not a war, not a vote, not even a choice. A resonance. By the end of the first week, the planet had begun to drift into two states of being. Same world, two realities. People still walked the same streets, but they were no longer in the same place. Some looked up and saw beauty. Others looked around and saw threat. Brad Carter saw it in the faces. In coffee shops, parks, crosswalks, you could tell. Not by fashion or politics, but by energy. The clear moved differently. Open-chested, grounded, soft-eyed. The clingers were glitching, not like before. Now it was subtle, like actors forgetting their lines mid-scene, then snapping into practiced smiles a second too late. Brad walked past a man on the street corner holding a cardboard sign. It didn't say, "The end is near." It said, "I can't fake it anymore." And under that, in scratchy ink, "Please help." Brad sat beside him for 10 minutes. No words. Just presence. The man cried like he hadn't since childhood. Dr. Alethea Rain called an emergency council the next day. She and a dozen other scientists, therapists, and spiritual leaders gathered in a glass hall, now referred to as a harmonic neutral zone, one of many designated spaces where the Luxari frequency stabilized minds and soothed nervous systems. "We're seeing two types of awakenings," she explained. "Some people rise with the new frequency. Others collapse beneath it." She pointed to a screen behind her showing brain scans. One image glowed with vibrant, integrated activity. The other showed hyperactive amygdala response. Fear, identity protection, ego overdrive. Those who resist aren't evil. They're operating from survival mode. But here's the thing. The parasite can only survive in fractured identity, and that identity is failing. A young neurologist raised her hand. So what happens when the mask dies, but the person refuses to integrate? Alethea paused, then answered truthfully. They fracture. Some become shells. Others become dangerous. Meanwhile, the Luxari had grown quiet, externally at least. They no longer broadcast to the skies. They spoke through the pods, through resonance, through the heart. But to those who had been through the process, like Brad, they were constant. A living presence behind reality. "We are not leaving," they told him. "But neither are we staying. The decision will not be made with bombs or leaders. It will be made in silence." One by one, a global signal went out that night. Not from the Luxari, from humans. The Clear, from dozens of countries, launched a live stream, a simple broadcast from different cities, reading aloud the same message in hundreds of languages. We choose peace. We choose healing. We choose the light, and we will not abandon those who cannot yet see. But we will no longer feed the parasite with our energy, attention, or pain. Let it starve. Let it fade. The message ended with a single Luxari glyph shown in silence. The symbol meant separation without hatred. Brad received a message from Alethea. It read, "You're not just healing, you're anchoring. You're holding frequency now, whether you like it or not. I need you to come to Atlanta base." When he arrived, he was met by others, dozens, who had all undergone the pod process and emerged radiant. Each one had a calm, golden energy about them. Not flashy, not ecstatic, just real. These were the anchors, people chosen to hold a stable field around Luxari vessels, calming nervous systems, tuning the environment, making it easier for the next wave to awaken. Brad stood in a ring with them, barefoot on soft grass. They didn't chant, they didn't sing, they just stood in presence. And the earth listened. But elsewhere, the resistance was forming. In abandoned warehouses, dark forums, secret networks, the clingers gathered. Some were scared, some were furious. Some simply wanted to feel in control again. They began calling themselves the Preservers. Their message was clear. This is not healing. This is erasure. Humanity must not be domesticated by cosmic therapy. We are warriors, not patients. They spread disinformation, claimed the pods stole memories, accused the Luxari of emotional colonization, said the frequency was sterilizing the population. Some even formed anti-resonance camps, playing harsh frequencies, loud broadcasts, chaos loops, all to drown out the clarity. And in some cases, it worked. Some people slipped back into confusion. Others snapped entirely. The Luxari offered no defense. They made no threats. They simply pulsed a new message. The split is accelerating. Two Earths cannot remain as one. One will rise, the other will remain. Each soul must choose. Not with words, with frequency. Brad sat by the river that night, watching reflections ripple over water. He could feel it now, not just within, but around. Two worlds occupying the same space, slowly pulling apart. Not in landmass, in truth, in resonance. He closed his eyes. He could feel Maya on the other frequency, still clinging, still watching, but glitching. And maybe, just maybe, still reachable. Chapter 8. The Drones. They didn't look like weapons. The drones shimmered like glass orbs, no bigger than a basketball, spinning slowly in the air with trails of soft light behind them. They floated through cities, forests, deserts, and ruins, gliding silently, responding to frequency, not movement. They had no cameras, no voice, no visible tech, just presence and a purpose. To find the parasite where it still hid, not to destroy, but to extract. Brad watched the first one arrive in person. He stood outside the Atlanta base, where dozens of anchors were gathered in a harmonic ring. The air buzzed with warmth and clarity. People were calm. A child sat peacefully on the grass, watching clouds. Then the air changed. Not in danger, in density. A presence approached from the east, slow, weightless. The drone. It glided between trees, casting soft prisms across the faces of those watching. And it paused in front of a man standing alone near the edge of the field. His name was Ezra. Brad remembered him from orientation. Quiet, shaky. A man who hadn't yet entered a pod but wanted to. The drone hovered inches from Ezra's chest. The light around him flickered. Ezra gasped, hands trembling, eyes wide. He began breathing fast, looking around, looking for escape. But the drone didn't move closer. It simply emitted a tone. One note. Low. Vibrational. It pulsed through the air like the earth itself had exhaled. Ezra fell to his knees. Brad stepped forward, but the others held him back. No, one anchor whispered. Let it happen. Ezra's body shook. Tears spilled. But then his hands opened. He wasn't fighting anymore. The drone pulsed once more, and a black shimmer lifted from Ezra's chest. Like smoke, but not smoke. Like memory, dense, old, heavy. The drone absorbed it silently, then floated upward. Ezra collapsed, but when he rose, he was smiling. Across the world, the drones activated. Not to all. Only to those who had resisted, but were still reachable. In homes, in prisons, in hospitals, in war zones, the drones found people on the verge. They didn't force. They invited. We feel the hesitation. We feel the wound beneath the mask. We offer rest, one final time. Not everyone welcomed them. In resistance zones, chaos machines were activated, giant generators emitting sonic blasts, high-volume static, and emotional disorientation patterns. In some cases, they disrupted the drones, temporarily. One group in South America hacked a drone and attempted to reprogram it. It didn't fight back. It simply dimmed. And when they disassembled it, they found no hardware, only light, and a single glyph etched into the internal surface. Truth does not attack. It waits to be invited. Brad sat with Dr. Rain, monitoring global resonance patterns. They watched as areas on the map glowed with rising frequency, and others began to dim. "We're approaching saturation," she said. Brad nodded. "And separation. Some of them still don't want peace. They don't know what it feels like." She looked at him. "And some do, and still choose the power." That evening, a drone appeared outside Maya's apartment. It floated there, silent, waiting. Maya stared at it through the window, hands on the sill, eyes hard. Brad felt it. Across the city, he could feel her. The drone pulsed once. Maya stepped back. Her breath quickened. Her hand trembled. She slammed the window shut. The drone did not leave. It hovered. Silent. A Luxari message rang through the hearts of all anchors. This is the last invitation. The parasite will not survive the next phase. Those who still host it must choose healing or collapse. We do not punish, we release. but time is not infinite. The clear gathered across the globe that night in circles. No one spoke. They simply held hands, breathed, and anchored the light. They weren't trying to save anyone. They were holding the door open. Brad sat in one of the largest gatherings, surrounded by 1,000 others under the glowing arc of a hovering ship. And in the center of their silence, a drone descended. It hovered above them. Then, broke apart. Not in violence, in light. Its pieces scattered like stardust, sinking into the earth, into the people, into the air. "You are ready now," the Luxari said. "The drones are no longer needed. You are the field." In her apartment, Maya sat on the floor, hands clenched, staring at the spot where the drone had been. It was gone now. But something had changed. The mask was gone. Her performance shattered. All that remained was herself. And she didn't know who that was anymore. Chapter 9. The Last Choice. It began at 11:11 UTC. The sky changed, not visibly, not to the unawakened eye, but to those tuned to the resonance. The world shimmered. A translucent ripple passed through clouds, trees, oceans, as if reality itself had exhaled. Every ship across the globe pulsed in unison, soft, golden light radiating downward like a sunrise breaking through dimensions. And the Luxari spoke. Not through the sky, not through the pods, but through the core of every living being. The split is now irreversible. You will not be judged. You will not be shamed. But the road you walk must match the frequency you carry. Two Earths cannot occupy the same space. One will rise, the other will remain. Each soul will follow its resonance. Each resonance is a choice. Brad felt it immediately, like tectonic plates under his skin shifting. A subtle but absolute separation. He stood in the middle of a city street, surrounded by others frozen in place, some with hands over hearts, some confused, some afraid. He could feel it in their bodies, the difference, not belief, not politics, vibration. Some pulsed with peace, others with noise, and it was happening now. The Luxari voice continued, "You do not have to be perfect. You only have to be willing. Willing to see, willing to feel, willing to let go of control and return to truth. Those who carry fear as identity will remain in the field where fear still rules. Those who carry light, rise." Brad's phone buzzed. A message from Alethea. "This is it. The phasing has started. I'm at North Watch Point. Are you okay?" He typed back, "Yes. I feel it. I'm holding." She responded with one final message. "Then we're ready." All across the world, anchors stood in place. In parks, in deserts, on rooftops, by oceans, holding peace, holding presence. Not trying to save, not trying to prove, just being what the world needed to become. In her apartment, Maya stared at the mirror. But she didn't see herself. She saw a fractured mask, shimmering, twitching. Her skin looked wrong, her eyes empty. The Luxari hadn't spoken to her since the drone, but she could feel the moment arriving. "You will not be forced," the memory of the drone had whispered. But silence is still a choice. She hadn't gone into the pod. She hadn't attacked. She had simply waited. Now there was no more time. Brad stood atop a rooftop, watching the city blur. Not vanish. Blur. Some buildings shimmered slightly, flickering at the edges like old film. People on the street below looked different to him. Some looked transparent. Others radiant. The split wasn't physical yet, but it was close. He whispered a question into the wind. What happens to them, the ones who stay? The Luxari answered inside him, softly. They remain, in the frequency they chose. The earth will hold both timelines briefly, then gently part. Will they suffer? They will repeat until they are ready, not punished, only paused. Brad felt tears rise, not out of fear, out of grief, for the version of humanity that wouldn't rise. Not yet. Back in her apartment, Maya screamed. The mirror cracked, not from sound, but from frequency. The resonance she had resisted was now pushing against her skin like light against stone. She dropped to her knees, not crying, just silent. Her body still, her mask gone. And in that stillness, for the first time in her life, she heard the Luxari. You are not too late, but this is the final moment. The light is not behind you. It is waiting ahead. All you must do is step toward it. Across the world, people stood in fields of glass and salt and soil and asphalt. Some took off their shoes. Some folded their hands. Some looked up and smiled. And then it began. The air split, not like a tear, like a decision. Reality itself parted, softly, soundlessly. Two versions of Earth began to phase. The light Earth rose in frequency, lifting those aligned with compassion, integration, healing. The shadow Earth remained behind, familiar, static, echoing with old noise. There was no explosion, no rapture, only resonance. Each person's soul tuned into its world and followed. Brad felt his body grow lighter, not floating, not weightless, just clear. Like gravity had lifted, but belonging had deepened. He felt safe for the first time in his life. Not because the world had changed, but because he had become unshakable within it. He turned his head toward Maya's building and saw her, standing on the roof, facing him, her eyes filled with tears, and then she glowed, not brightly, not fully, but just enough. Enough to be seen. And step forward. Chapter 10. The Great Unmasking. The world didn't end. It revealed itself. One reality settled into clarity, the other into collapse. Across the light earth, the sky deepened into a golden blue that pulsed with life. Trees shimmered, wind moved like breath. Buildings lost their edge and seemed to hum with something ancient, as if remembering what they were before concrete. The people who remained in this frequency walked differently. Not faster, not slower, just without weight. The war inside their bodies, the constant bracing, shrinking, doubting, was gone. Brad stood in a garden that used to be a city park. Now it pulsed with bioluminescent life, plants realigning with the resonance. Birds circled above, gliding without flapping, like they too had been waiting for gravity to become kindness. Children danced barefoot in the grass, and no one stopped them. No one said, "Be quiet, sit down, don't be strange." There was no more performative parenting, no more performative anything. The final Luxari message came not in language, but in image. Every soul still anchored in the light earth received a vision. A child kneeling beside a cracked mirror. The mirror reflecting not their face, but their parents' voice. The voice shattering. And the child rising, whole, unblinking, walking forward into light. Then the transmission faded, and the Luxari spoke their final words. The illusion was survival. The truth is presence. You are now your own source. We have shown the path. You will walk it. Together. In the shadow earth, the story was different. The sky stayed gray, not storming, not clear, just stuck, clouded, cold. People moved through the streets slowly. Some tried to carry on as before, giving orders, demanding attention, lashing out. But no one listened. The power structures didn't fall with riots or revolutions. They simply evaporated. Not because of rebellion, but because the illusion of obedience had broken. Maya walked through a ghost city. She had chosen, in the last moment, to let go. But her body was still catching up. She moved through places she once ruled, conference rooms, podiums, screens, and watched as the mask she wore refused to rematerialize. Every time she tried to slip back into her old voice, her old posture, her old authority, it cracked, and her mouth went quiet. All across the shadow earth, narcissists, sociopaths, manipulators, those who had worn personas like armor, now found themselves exposed. Some wept, some screamed, some wandered aimlessly, repeating old phrases that no longer worked. I said I was sorry. You're too sensitive. You need to respect me. This is how the world works. No one reacted. No one fought. They just looked. And that look broke what centuries of war could not. The light earth had no flags, no borders, no leaders. It didn't need them. What governed the people was not policy. It was frequency. You couldn't fake peace. You couldn't mimic empathy. There was no need for punishment because dishonesty was impossible. Every lie rippled the air, and every truth restored it. Brad sat in a circle of young people beneath a tree that glowed faintly at dusk. They weren't students. He wasn't a teacher. They were remembering together. I used to think crying meant weakness, said a boy. Now I know it's release. A girl whispered, I used to hate my body. Now I can feel it again. An elder smiled. I used to believe healing took lifetimes. But now that I stopped running from the truth, it only takes one breath at a time. Maya entered a pod. Not one from the sky. A new one. Grown from the earth. Co-created by the people of the light earth and the wisdom left behind by the Luxari. It didn't pulse. It didn't glow. It just waited. She sat inside, alone, and didn't ask for help. She just remembered. The times she watched Brad cry behind a door and said nothing. The times she smiled in boardrooms and ignored the hollow inside. The times she told herself, I'm not like them, while becoming exactly what hurt her. And for the first time since the split, she felt it, not guilt, not punishment, but the soft ache of coming home to the self she had abandoned. The final unmasking didn't come with fire. It came with forgiveness. Not the kind where someone says, "I forgive you," out of moral superiority. The kind where the inner child is no longer waiting to be rescued. Because the adult finally showed up. Brad walked through the new world with no purpose, and that was okay. The Luxari had taught them to be, not to do, not to fix, just to stay present, to anchor the truth with their existence. And in doing so, the world healed around them. Chapter 11. The Two Earths. Maya returned on the 7th day. She didn't announce it, she didn't explain. She simply walked into the quiet gathering in the garden near the old fountain, now a pool of mirrored water where people sat, reflected, and released. Brad saw her across the circle. She wasn't glowing. She wasn't broken. She was real. Eyes no longer sharp. Posture no longer armored. For the first time in their adult lives, he saw his sister without the mask. She sat beside him, said nothing. He reached for her hand, and she let him. The world didn't celebrate. There were no parades, no headlines, no victory, only breathing, only presence, only the strange, sacred silence that follows the end of a long, invisible war. Each earth now pulsed at its own rhythm. The shadow earth faded slowly, gently. Systems failed without violence. Governments dissolved without scandal. Narcissists wandered the halls of empty towers, shouting at echoes. Some were cared for by those who had glimpsed the light and stayed behind as quiet helpers. Others lived in loops, repeating scripts that no longer worked, slowly unraveling. A place of pause, not punishment, a dimension of reflection for those still too afraid to feel. The light earth bloomed, not with cities, but with connection. Communities formed without command. Structures rose organically. Homes shaped around trees. Schools built from open circles, not rows. People lived not by rules, but by resonance. And children were born. Children who didn't cry in fear at birth, but in awe. Children who never learned to suppress, only to express. Children who carried no inherited wound. Brad had a dream, or maybe it was a memory. He stood in a room of the shadow earth, dusty, flickering, as if the world itself had been recorded on failing VHS. Maya stood there too, her old self, pristine and distant. They faced a door. Behind it, their father's voice called out, not with cruelty, with familiarity. Brad reached for the handle, but Maya stopped him. "You don't have to go back," she said. Brad looked at her, not the version in front of him, but the one beside him now, in the light earth. She nodded, and the door dissolved. He awoke with tears in his eyes, not from pain, from relief. The karmic loop has closed. The Luxari's voice was faint now, rare, but always true. Maya began planting things, not to eat, to remember. Each flower she planted marked a memory once hidden, each sprout a truth once denied. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. The earth knew her now, and it had forgiven her. Dr. Rain walked with Brad one afternoon, past a stream that had begun to glow faintly in the evenings. "The infants born now," she said. "They don't cry the same way. They don't flinch at sound. They make eye contact like they've been here before. They have, Brad said softly. She nodded. They don't inherit our trauma. Not genetically. Not energetically. Their blueprint is clean. Brad looked up at the sky, where the ships had once hovered. Now only stars remained. They did what they came to do. No, she said. We did. They just reminded us how. In the center of the new world stood a crystal, not Luxari made, but earthborn, clear, humming. Not worshipped, understood. People came not to pray, but to listen. The crystal didn't speak in words. It resonated. And each time someone stepped close, it reflected back the frequency of their truth, not their potential, their current being, not to judge, but to show. And every time someone walked away, they walked more whole. Brad sat beside the crystal one evening as dusk stretched lavender across the horizon. Maya approached. No words passed between them. She sat, closed her eyes, took one breath, and the crystal pulsed. Software forgiving. She opened her eyes, wet with emotion. I'm here, she whispered. Brad smiled. You always were. Chapter 12. The Return of Truth. Years passed, but they weren't measured in time. They were measured in clarity, in the number of lies no longer told, in the weight of silences that no longer carried shame, in the moments people looked into each other's eyes without fear, without roles, without masks. The light earth was no longer new. It had simply become what always should have been. Brad Carter was older now, his hair silvered at the edges, his hands lined with years spent planting, lifting, holding, but his eyes were brighter than they had ever been when he was young. He lived in a small dome made of woven crystal and living vines. It needed no locks. It held no secrets. There were no rooms, only spaces. No one needed to hide. He spent most of his days walking, listening, sitting with children who asked beautiful questions like, why did people lie back then? What is a war? Why would someone want to hurt your feelings just to feel better? He didn't always know how to answer, but the crystal in the village center did. When a child placed their hand on it, they didn't get explanations. They got knowing. The Luxari had not returned, but they had never truly left. Their final transmission had been etched, not into stone, but into frequency itself. It now hummed gently through the planet, beneath soil, through wind, within the bodies of those born here. Their last message was not a warning, not a teaching. It was a reminder. Truth was never far. You only needed to stop running from it. You are not becoming something greater. You are returning to what you already are. Maya became a teacher of quiet. She never lectured. She never stood at the front of anything. She simply sat. And people came to sit with her. In her presence, others remembered how to hear themselves. Her lessons were not quotes or stories, but moments like a tear that finally fell after decades of holding, a deep breath after years of shallow panic, a shared silence between two souls who once hated each other, now healed beyond words. Brad began writing. Not books, not instructions, but memories. He wrote them by hand, in long scrolls passed from village to village. Stories of the day the Luxari came, the day the masks fell, the day he saw his sister's true eyes, the day silence became sacred. He didn't call himself a storyteller. He called himself a witness. One day, a girl approached him by the stream. She had clear eyes and dirt on her hands. She was maybe 8, maybe 10. The children didn't count age anymore. "Brad," she said, "is it true that some people used to feel bad about being alive?" Brad nodded. "Yes." "Why?" He thought for a long time, then answered, "Because they were taught to fear their own hearts." The girl tilted her head. "That's silly." He smiled. "I know." The crystal in the center of the village had changed over the years. It had grown, not taller, not wider, just deeper. When people touched it now, they didn't see reflections of who they were. They saw the frequency of who they were becoming, not in potential, but in trust. One morning, Brad walked to the crystal alone. He had a scroll in his hand, the final one. Not an ending, a seed. He placed it at the base of the crystal and whispered, "Let them remember." The crystal pulsed once, soft gold, and the scroll dissolved into light. At dusk, Brad stood beside Maya as the sun painted the sky in prismatic hues. Children played nearby, their laughter like wind chimes. Maya spoke. "Do you think the others, those who stayed behind, do you think they'll find it?" Brad didn't ask what "it" meant. He just answered. "Eventually. Light never forgets where it came from, even if it takes lifetimes." She nodded. They stood in silence. No hurry. No heaviness. Just presence. And above them, far beyond what the eye could see, a faint crystalline hum echoed through space. Not calling out, not seeking, just being. Because the truth no longer needed to arrive. It had finally returned. The end.